Welcome to the Beyond the Bestseller podcast. I'm your host, Kelly Schuknecht, and today's guest is Julie Duffy Dillon, author of Find Your Food Voice, and the subtitle is Defy Diet Culture, Declare Body Liberation, and Reclaim Your Peace. I think this is going to be a great conversation. Welcome, Julie.
Thanks, Kelly. Thank you for inviting me on your show. I appreciate it.
Yeah, you and I were just talking briefly before we started recording about how I haven't had any food related or like eating diet culture related kind of books yet. I have a couple coming out here now, but I'm really interested in this conversation and where this goes. So tell me about this book first and why you wrote it.
Oh, I'm so glad you asked this. So, this is a book that is combining the last 25 years of sitting with clients. You and I can see each other because we're on Zoom, and you can see this green couch behind me. And this is the couch that I had in my private practice. Wherever I had my office, I would take this couch with me. And so, for 25 years, clients would share with me their struggles with food and their body. And one of the common themes, no matter what people were struggling with, was how alone they felt. They just felt so isolated in this struggle with food and felt so ashamed of that, like feeling so alone. And what unfortunately, or not unfortunately, but really what I was thinking about the whole time was I wanted each client to be a fly on the wall because they would see how every single person was saying that. Even if they had different struggles, even if they had different like things going on in their life, everyone felt so alone. And so I started telling clients this. I'm like, hey, this struggle you're having is very common. And the way that you're talking about it is how other people are talking about it too. And so I felt this need to share like this pattern that I see. And so much of it is this thing that people are just holding on to, this blame and shame that really isn't theirs. The way that we've been told to manage food and our bodies goes against how our bodies really were like have evolved to become. And this industry profits from us feeling so bad and blaming ourselves. And what I've noticed is whenever I could help people just look over in that direction and notice how this industry was profiting from their self-hatred, how that would end up promoting health, well-being, improve relationships. And so I wanted to just share that with as many people as possible. And yeah, Find Your Food Voice is basically this megaphone to want to shout, hey, you are not doing it wrong. You don't need to be fixed, but the world does. And we can all reject diets and fix it together then.
Yeah, yeah. So reject diet. I will say, I am a fan of Whole30. I do that. I have done that several times. I'm miserable while I'm doing it, but I do like it. But to me, I've always been very anti-diet
Mhm.
because I feel like it's I feel like you need to eat healthy all the time, not just like for a period of time. So in my mind, diet is like a 30-day period of time that's a bad example because I just said Whole30, but whatever, like a period of time. Like I remember, okay, so I remember when I was young, my mom doing something like the grapefruit diet or something where you eat like a grapefruit for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and then there's a few other things you mix in there, whatever. But I
Mhm.
remember that, and I always told myself like I'm never gonna do anything like that. Of course, when I got older, then I was like, I've got to get a handle on what I'm eating and how it's
Mhm.
affecting me. And so I did try Whole30 and I do like it, but I try to not get I like it because it makes me feel good. Like I
Mhm.
feel good when I'm doing it. Yes, I lose weight, whatever. But anyway, I've just always really liked doing that. But other than that, like I try not to do anything that's like I feel like that's like a cleanse, not like a diet. I don't know. I'm just saying you're like,
I'm
I
staying
can
very quiet, but obviously I've been around the block on diets. Like I've heard so many diets over the last 25 years. So yeah, I'm going to have my judgments, but also like we're all just surviving in this world, right? Like we're all just trying to do the best we can, and we're all trying to promote health in the way that we can. So that's why it doesn't matter what I'm going to judge it as because you're doing what works for you. And I think that's one of the big important messages is like, you get to decide what you do with your body, and it's nobody else's decision but yours. And the more we can really promote that for every single person, I think that's really important. But in case you or the listeners, how do I know if it's a diet or not? Or what is a diet? The thing that I notice with the diet industry, what they have as part of their pattern is there's this kind of like seductive side to it that is very hopeful. And that's why maybe for some of the times you've done these, have felt really good because there's like this buzzy kind of like wonderfulness of, oh my gosh, I'm getting my stuff together. I got my things in control here. I know what's going on. And it can feel really hopeful. And from there's usually some like really nice short-term outcomes of where increased energy, maybe lower blood sugar.
Yeah.
Some people, like I've worked with some people who are in higher weight bodies and then they've are like, oh my gosh, my doctor's like congratulating me, or now I fit in the airplane seat, or there may be some like short-term perks to it. But the thing that is really important to keep in mind about like diets and what we know we could really spend some time on like, what is actually a diet or what's not. But
Yeah.
and I have lots of thoughts on it, but also it's important to not get too stuck in there because anything that we're doing that is short term can have some consequences that in the long term can be harmful. And in particular, any kind of intervention that we do that does result in some behavior change just in the short term is something that's been connected to cause higher blood sugar and cause higher blood sugar and weight
Mm.
cycling, which the weight cycling is like how people's weights can go up and down when they do interventions, and that's something that really doesn't show up for a couple of years. And so a lot of times people will only associate the intervention or the diet as the short-term outcome and those like nice like hopeful sparks, but really it's 2 years later where some of the negative things will come up whether someone's on it or not. Like I know Whole 30 is only 30 days, so most people are just on it for a short period of time. It's a great sell because of that, I think. If you could just do it for 30 days. But what you may not remember 2 to 5 years later about doing that diet and maybe thinking, oh my gosh, my blood sugar's higher. It could actually be from the Whole 30 that you did 2 years ago and
Okay.
not what you're currently doing because of how it does just show up long term only. And that's one of the hardest things I think about diet interventions and how they can be tricky is that, and that's why I think we blame ourselves, is it usually doesn't show up until later. And then instead of being like, oh, maybe that was the diet stuff I was doing a couple years ago. No, it's not you that did it wrong. It's the diet. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So what do you think about intermittent fasting? Because that's a big
Well,
trend right now.
it's very bring all the trends, right? And one thing I know to be true is that research has shown that not eating for long periods of time is not something that helps with blood sugar, with insulin levels, with blood pressure. Short term, fabulous. Any of these diets that are popular, short term interventions will show some positive outcome, but long term, it's showing still these negative outcomes. And honestly, we have over 100 years of diet research that tells us without a doubt that there is not a diet that exists that actually promotes health long term. So
Mm.
it's like the unsexy side of nutrition science is, oh, wow, this exciting thing yet again doesn't work. But again, like the short term nutrition data that we do have shows some favorable outcomes with intermittent fasting. And nutrition science is a really hard science to study, even though I know we all eat all the time. So it seems so like elementary, but it is actually a hard one to study because there's so many variables to control for.
Yep.
So I'm like, yeah, nutrition in the end is really quite boring, but it also is something where we have so much data now to show that, yeah, even things like intermittent fasting, and that's are not good for health, but that's also just like physical health. I do have a lot of experience with intermittent fasting because I worked with folks with eating disorders for so long. And so and I know sometimes people don't want to call them the same thing, but I'm like, I was working with people who were fasting because they were experiencing anorexia. And yeah, there were some negative health consequences, but also what about the other parts of our life? Like this is something that really impacted relationships. If you're fasting for whatever period of time, that's something that's going to make a lot of us hangry. And I don't know, I have 2 kids and in a relationship, like managing all those dynamics and being hangry is not something that's really helpful for my relationships. Oh,
Right.
and then the other one that it also impacts big time is sleep and like quality of sleep. And I'm almost 50 and I've had 2 babies in my life. And I remember sleep deprivation. It's not a good thing. And it's something that really also negatively impacts our life. Yeah, I am not a fan of intermittent fasting either. I'm like, if there's some research that comes out that's long term, it shows that it has a benefit, I will listen. But until then, I'm gonna be guarded against it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I know people talk about intermittent fasting and how it's helped them and how great it is for them, whatever. And so I did that for a while too. I'm opening up all of my,
I love it.
I said I'm like so against dieting, but I have done that also. But I was doing one meal a day, so just dinner for a long
Mhm.
period of time. And it was great for weight management, weight loss for a while, and then just like maintaining. But I was eating one meal a day and I was real unhappy about 3 o'clock
I
every day because
I
my
bet.
meal was like dinner. That was
I
it.
bet. I think that's something so important to really shine a light on because what we know to be true is when we don't eat it frequently enough, it does lower blood sugar. And blood sugar, for some people, the way they know that they have low blood sugar is irritability. Like I've had partners say this about clients of mine, be like, I know their blood sugar is getting too low because they start to be really grumpy. I think they're not eating enough at this time of day or whatever. And so I think that's another thing to keep in mind is like it's not just your physical health that we need to talk about because if we're going to live to 100 and be grumpy and alone because nobody can stand to be around us, like how healthy is that? And maybe having more frequent meals and relationships and enjoying different people. I don't know. There's something to that I think is also important.
Yeah, I agree. And I had stopped doing it because I was like, I've got to like figure out a way to be happy and be comfortable in my own skin. Just it's okay. So what is the solution? Like, okay, don't do diets, right? So what do you do then?
So, find your food voice. That basically, my title of my book is helping you to connect with this innate knowing that you were born with. I know you mentioned some of the things that you've thought about in your own life, and I appreciate you sharing and being like vulnerable about your own dieting history. But like, we all were born knowing how much to eat, what to eat, and how to just make it all happen with the choices that were in front of us. But we have like our generation, I'm a little older than you, but like our generation have been brought up with the diet industry, right? This is something that we were just born into thinking about, oh, we have to be a certain size in order to be healthy or a certain size in order to be acceptable. And it's something that was passed down to us. And so all these different systems, and when I say systems, I don't mean just like the diet industry, but I also think other systems of oppression like racism and other types of systems that are preventing people from having power, those are a part of the diet industry. And those are really powerful, right? Like those are things that can really take up a lot of space and be really powerful. And so considering your own life and what type of life you're living, looking at what systems are impacting you is a way for you to know, okay, this is why I have this pressure. And it's time to stop blaming myself for this like desire to eat less or just control my weight and instead think about what do I need to do just to promote health on my own terms. And I call that our food voice. And so the book takes the reader through a system to get to that. And it's tricky because unlike a diet, like your food voice is unique to you. Like I can't just hand you a sheet of paper and be like, this is what you eat because we are two different humans. And so that's the challenge of writing this book. It was really like, how do I help write down a way that I would take my clients through sitting on this green couch that would take a year or two to really help them get to into a 300-page book. Like, how am I going to do this? But that was the challenge that I was like, I will accept this challenge. And a
Hmm.
lot of it goes through like putting down the timeline of your life and all the different diets you've tried and some of those seductive sides that we talked about earlier. There's this like spark that happens when a person is starting to crave a diet and acknowledging what are those things that kind of hook you in, and then naming those short-term and long-term outcomes from a diet. So once you map out a number of the diets that you've tried, and you know you've named a few, but as you name them and you go through this process, you start to see a pattern. For some people, it's, oh, it's springtime. I'm going to have to wear less clothes soon. I need a diet. So it may just be like because of the seasons changing, or it may be like, oh, I have a wedding coming up. And so I want a diet. Or maybe your doctor said your blood sugar is getting too high. So there's some health things that are pushing you to diet. But basically finding out what are the trends and the patterns for you. So then as they come up, you can name them and put those away as this is not something that you are in charge of. Like when I say not in charge of, you're in charge of like your decisions for your body, but the pressures that you've been put on, those are not for you. And instead considering things like your energy levels, your sleep, and also like things like lab values and adding nutrition in a way that feels good to you on your terms and also what you have access to. So much of what I'm hearing in the diet trends are against like prepackaged foods or like eating organic or clean or things like that, which that's going to be great for many people, I guess. But what about someone who just can't afford to go down to the farmer's market and get their food for the
Right.
week? Are they not supposed to ever eat boxed mac and cheese again? No, like we need to be able to incorporate whatever you have access to promote health. And there's a way to do that. And that's what this
Yeah.
book is all about. Yeah.
The best is when there's like organic boxed mac and cheese, and you're like, oh, that makes it healthy. That's great.
It's like it's all a gimmick. That's what I think is
Right.
really important to remember. Like again, the diet industry, they're not really wanting to promote health. They're wanting to make a buck. And when a label says it's a certain thing, there are very few parts of the labeling process for food that's regulated. So they can say whatever they want or they
Mhm.
know it sells. And so organic food sells better in certain places. So if they slap that on there, and of course it has to be organic if it says it is, but they're only
Right.
going to provide that, not necessarily because it's going to promote health, but because they know someone will buy it and spend the money on it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's interesting because when you talked about the seasonality of like what gets in your mind as far as
Mhm.
dieting, but I was thinking about that. I said my mom used to do diets and I told myself I'm never going to do that. So the diets that I have always tried have been the ones that are like more discreet. Nobody
Mm.
knows I'm not eating, right? Nobody knows I'm not eating except maybe my husband when I'm cranky at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. But other than that, it doesn't affect anybody else. Or Whole 30, like it's only 30 days and you can still eat out. You just aren't drinking alcohol and you just come up with anyway. So I think that's maybe somewhat why I picked the things that I did. But I definitely next time I get the like urge to do Whole
Mhm.
30, I'm gonna make sure I read your book first and remind myself that it's just all a gimmick and it's not a long-term solution.
Yeah,
Yes.
because you mentioned there was a part of it that you felt awful doing it. There's
Well,
part that don't
we
feel
are
good too.
we're big. We like to go out for happy hour. It's today's Thursday as we're recording,
Yeah.
and we always go out for happy hour on Thursday. Like
Mhm.
we go out to dinner a lot and we have drinks with dinner, and you can't drink on Whole 30. And so it always affected me like going out. Like I could still go out, but it wasn't as fun. And
So
so
there's
like
some
by the end of
negative
it, you're just
there.
like, oh, I'm just done with this.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's a part that's sneaky with dieting. You've said a couple of things that I think are so important, like how diets sometimes we can't tell if they're a diet or not. And not that I love that your mom dieted, but I love that there was this part of your brain that was like, we need to protect you from this. This is not okay. I don't want to have a life like this. I think that's so great because for many people, that does not happen. There was something protecting you. But the diet industry has figured out a way to label things to make them seem so normal and
Mhm.
not really a big deal. I think that's something that's really tricky and that I cover in the book is food is one of the five basic needs of a human being, like oxygen and water. And when someone is like almost drowning, they obviously are traumatized, right? Dieting is also traumatic in that way. Like when we don't get enough food, our body will react to it. And for some
Mm.
people, that can feel like obsessive or like they're addicted to it. I don't know if you felt like even like a withdrawal sometimes when you do the Whole 30, like sometimes people blame the person on that or the food, but there's also a part of that is from diet trauma. I don't know. I think the perspective I have in the book is going to, for some people, it may be like very eye-opening and it's surprising, but it comes from just listening to people for over 20 years who've been like battling like how do I decide what to eat and just feeling like they've tried every diet and then they're like this isn't working, what can I do? And so in a way I would hope for you, Kelly, it would be like a catalyst or like this like thing that would expedite you to not have to go through all those things that people that I worked with had to go through. And again, there's like that part in your brain that I just love so much that was like, no, we're not going to do those really crazy diets. But yeah, maybe you can even eliminate them all. That would be so great.
Yes, no, I'm on
I'm
board.
rooting for you.
I'm totally on board with that idea. I It's just hard. So I had said that I'm not going to do that. But then as your metabolism slows down and your body starts changing as you get older, then I would have this draw. But I got to do something, right? And just
Yes.
trying to figure out like what to do. So I'm curious, you mentioned your clients, you mentioned the couch and talking with people about food stuff, dieting. What is it that you actually do with clients?
hmm I have been a registered dietitian for 25 years. That was the main area that I was helping people with. And I also am trained as a therapist, helping people sort through this complicated history they have with food. Many people were diagnosed with eating disorders. Other people were I just don't know how to eat without dieting. And dieting hasn't worked. And maybe looking for another option that feels like accessible. Sometimes they would work with me. Right now, I actually don't work with clients one on one anymore. I'm focusing on speaking and writing. Like I have a podcast too. And so that's the way that I'm
Nice.
helping people is through those means. But yeah, that's how I would do it. And there's a lot of clinicians out there that focus on just this. If you or anyone listening is, oh my gosh, I totally would love to have that kind of dietitian to just help me with my relationship with food. There are so many people out there that can help you with that. And there's this whole new world basically then that you can experience without having to think about dieting again. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. So I will link to Find Your Food Voice
Mhm.
in the show notes. Where else can listeners find you online, learn more about what you're doing, and connect with you?
So my website's probably the best place. That's going to be at julieduffydillon.com, but you can find me on YouTube and I do have a podcast with the same name, Find Your Food Voice.
Great. Julie, I definitely will be reading your book, I promise.
Oh, good thing. Yeah.
Before I try another gimmicky thing, I'm gonna read your book and I'm gonna make sure I get my head in the right place.
Awesome.
Any I think every woman should probably read this book because we all struggle with this.
Yes. If you're eating, you're going to be struggling with your relationship with food. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks so much, Julie. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
Looking for a community of women writers to support and inspire you on your journey? Join the Author Power Circle. Connect weekly with fellow authors, stay accountable, and move your book forward in an encouraging community. Learn more at kellyschuknecht.com.